Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here, and things have been evolving at the Can-Am Missing Project headquarters. As many of you know who have been following this video is going to be about missing people and the associated factors that go with them. Now, we've evolved the channel just in the last month to a new segment, a Skinwalker Ranch segment, and missing people segments. And some people are going to say, why are you doing this, Dave? First of all, I'm a patriot. I greatly believe in our country. And I don't believe that everyone is getting the truth in the news, thus the news segment. Skinwalker Ranch segment. Again, as I've been told by George Knapp, who spent many hours at that ranch, coupled with my time with Colm Kelleher, George has told me that there's something at that ranch that is related to our research. I pay attention to that. And then the missing people. So this segment is about missing people, but there's three prongs to our YouTube presentations, and you've just heard them. Now, YouTube has started to do something just recently, and they did it to my Skinwalker Ranch segments, which is a bit humorous, in that they put a warning up that this video deals with suicide and suicidal issues, and there may be issues and photos that are uncomfortable to you, so be careful. It said something along those lines. I've seen it. And not only is that a blatant lie, it's a falsehood and it's manipulation of the channel. None of my Skinwalker Ranch episodes have I ever talked about suicide or related those issues. Now, I know that you guys, all of the village, understand why I'm talking about suicide and mental health. But YouTube wants to demonize it and push people away. I've never shown any video, photo, illustration, cartoon of a suicide. Never, ever, I never would. Now, I talk about it, but I think I use an educated approach, and I tell you facts dealing with mental health. Apparently they don't want you to see that or hear that because they're pushing people away. So you can trust me that I'm never going to put something in front of you that's going to be uncomfortable related to suicide, mental health, without first telling you. And I just wouldn't do it anyhow. But I'm going to put facts in front of you in the future. So, on to this video. And I will tell you right now, don't miss this segment of the letters because you're going to learn something about our research that I've never stated publicly. And we'll get to it in a second. So Dave, longtime listener and reader of your books, after watching your last segment on Skinwalker Ranch, I felt compelled to email you. I haven't watched the Skinwalker series, but will do so. You discussed how whatever entity is doing this may be able to tap into technology and control what happens. I often think that this entity can also affect the person's mind, almost like hacking into it, uploading a virus, and control them to do something that doesn't make sense. Human behavior is so odd that sometimes I question if we're in a simulation or being controlled to some degree. Expanded below if interested. If you look at some of the horrifying and bizarre things people are capable of, it's tough to believe that humans inherently make these decisions on their own. Examples include the horrible shooting at an elementary school. Hard to fathom that anyone or someone could do that. I agree. But tying this back to your work, it could explain why we can't put our finger on all this. Out of all of the theories that are presented to you, none of them can account for all the different cases. This includes what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch. Maybe at a macro level, there is an entity hacking into people to control them. For what reason, I don't know. In the sobering coincidences case are especially strange for me. What happens to these young men seems like they are being hacked and for a brief period of time go somewhere. They could also be aligned to all the odd things you notice in the cases you research, not just a sobering coincidence. Just a thought that came to me after watching your last video. Thanks for all you do. Some good points there, and we should all pay attention to that. Could our own government be hacking into our brains? Could this entity hack into our brains? If they can hack into a standalone telescope computer, like they did at Skinwalker, and they can take out data on that computer as you're thinking and searching for it, that means not only are they reading your mind, but they are also having the ability to erase what's on a standalone computer. Now, in my last upload, I talked about Skinwalker Ranch at length, and if you haven't watched it, I wish you would. Next letter. Hey, Dave. I'm a 29-year-old woman from Sweden. The day has finally come for me to compose this email to you, as it has been a long time in coming. I would like to start with a strange occurrence that happened to me when I was 13 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason with the feeling that there was something needed to investigate. I got up and I entered the kitchen, and there was a bright white light filling the room, accompanied with a high-pitched, almost unintelligible sound that rang loudly in my ears. Stop right there for a second. Surprisingly, I have woke up in the middle of the nights several nights in the last 10 years. And it'll go from dead quiet the way it should be, especially where we live, and I could hear a loud ringing. And it's almost as though I woke up to hear it. It's been weird. I got so startled by the unexplainable nature of this experience that I immediately got back to my room, closed the door, and hid under the covers, and swore to myself that I would forget about this occurrence ever took place. As you can see, I did not manage to forget about it till today. There is no natural explanation for this, and I've been unable to come up with during all these years since, but I thought I would add it to your archive. As for the second topic, since a young age, I've suffered from deep depression and feelings of isolation, even in the company of people. Despite this, I was a high achiever and did very well in school. Acting, sports, social life, later on in life as well. However, the depressions kept coming, and it eventually got so bad that I could not function according to the demands by the current day society. Some days I could not even get out of bed. At certain points I considered suicide on a daily basis. I'm glad to tell you that I have, in the last year or two, slowly come back to health and to actually living again, in a way that I haven't experienced since I was a child. This is actually not thanks to mental health care or any medication, although teaching out and asking for help, what an important part of the journey back to life. I now wake up every day with purpose. I have visions of a brighter future and help others who are suffering from mental health. My goal is to start a retreat for people who heal from anything from physical injuries to mental conditions, with the help of nature, gardening, healthy food, workouts, and meditation. I want to give you and Ben my deepest gratitude for giving me the strength to go on in my darkest moments. What has been a huge help in my recovery, besides from watching your videos, are spending time in nature, prioritizing taking care of myself, disconnecting from social media, news, etc., reconnecting to our natural way of living, and using an app called Waking Up that teaches meditation. The thing that got me to finally write this was when you mentioned that Ben talked about the pineal gland, which I must say that he was really onto something by mentioning. As someone who has experienced the firsthand, I cannot stress how much the knowledge and practice of getting to know myself and the human condition has changed my life for the better. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you do. You're such a strong role model, and your presence has so much purpose. Blessings to you and your family. Thank you for that. Very sweet, very nice. A couple of things she said that I want to pound home to those people out there that could relate to what she's saying. Number one, wake up every day for a purpose. I think I've told you before, there's a sign in my room that says, Don't be average. Don't wake up every day to be average. I take that to heart. And I know when I was a kid, my dad pounded that into my head, and I was one of those kids that took it to heart and said, you know what, I'm going to work twice. I might not be twice as smart as the guy next to me, but I'll outwork that guy or lady. And that's kind of been my motto through life. Now, finding a passion, I can't help you with that. I can tell you that in your heart, you kind of know what you're good at and what you like to do. And if you're not good at what you like to do, study it more and get good at it. Spending time in nature, a huge one in my world. I mean, it's enormous. Some people can clear their head walking through Times Square in New York, and that's their release. I get that. But for me, it's always been getting away to a quiet place, just sounds of nature, me and the birds and the squirrels and the fish. You gotta find a place where you can find that peace, where you can roll things around in your head and it doesn't bother you. It's important, really important, folks. Find a passion, socialize, and don't isolate. Huge 3 big points. Get out of bed, get out of your room, go down to the store. You don't have to buy anything. Ask some questions of the people who work there. Be polite, engage. You're going to be surprised how that little communication and that little interaction can do for you. And then while you're there, do something kind for somebody. There's an old man or an old woman walking through a door, hold the door, or help them out with their groceries, something. Next letter. Hi, Dave. I want to get into this by identifying a few bullet points I had for you. Dave, I believe that the identification of the clusters may have in fact uncovered observation and collection points from this unknown attacker. 2. It's also become clear by way of reading many of these case files that in some instances, people are seemingly drawn from miles and miles away, compelled to get in their cars and drive into national parks or forested areas, park alongside the road, get out of their cars and just walk into the forest, never to be seen again, leaving the car unlocked with the keys and everything of value sitting in it. True. For you X-Files fans out there, you can remember a few episodes of the X-Files just like what I've written about. 3. I believe that rather than looking at the victims that are very healthy and in shape in a perplexing way, as in, how could they just disappear? They knew the area, etc., is the wrong way of looking at it. I think they are targeted specifically because they are in good shape. Think about it. If whatever is going on in searching for the perfect specimen to capture and experiment on, what better place to find healthy people than those hiking through our national parks and forests? Something I've said before, and I've stated it repeatedly in Missing 411, a sobering coincidence, because the overwhelming vast majority of those victims are healthy, young, athletic, smart males. It's looking to extract or study specific areas of the body it would not want: obesity, drugs, alcohol, smoke on the lungs, etc. Would it? Pollution is everywhere. They seek cleanliness, healthy living. With them, being in such great shape or having more experience means they would probably be the last in a group on a trail. Make sure there aren't any stragglers, or leading the pack being the one with the most experience. 4. This is an intelligent force of some kind. If it wasn't, it would not wait until no one was looking to take these people. For example, a predator such as an African lion or a great shark, killer whale, or crocodile doesn't care who sees it eat. It's not bashful or afraid of being caught because it's the master of its domain. That's all its intellect tells it. With that in mind, can we then say that this thing may be afraid to be seen because beyond its apparent technological superiority that allows it to be stealthy in its captures and returns, it's in fact vulnerable? if we didn't know what it was and what to look for. If it was truly the ultimate apex predator, it would not fear being seen. Yet it seems to care. Is that because it fears us knowing? Because knowing it may give us the ability to fight back or avoid it completely? Something to think about. Oh, I thought about it. You know what I could apply this to? It's UFOs. We don't have tons and tons of great long-term footage of UFOs. They come and go, a few minutes here and there. Apply the same logic to that. My final thoughts and a question. I don't want to come off as trying to blame those people that were with the victims when they disappear. I'm not. I do, however, think that some of the reasons that people became separated made little sense. For example, when they come to a fork in the road and there are three hikers, one decides to take the easy path and that one will disappear, and the other two the tougher path for no reason whatsoever. Why? Why would that ever be a discussion? It's a group hike. You hike as a group. Why split up when you could all just go together on the trail? Is that going to make your experience less because you took the easier trail? So if you've had kids, you know the kids sometimes want to strike out on their own. Kids want to go their own way. They want to be their own explorer. And for parents, you know this has happened. And the last case is one where two little boys a few years apart, I believe 7 and 9, follow their mother on a hike that she decides that they'll take. The 9-year-old is barefoot and the 7-year-old is wearing sandals, as is the mother. They hike a few miles into the forest. When they come across an old logging road, the mother knows, and she remembers a small waterfall off the road a few hundred yards away. The 9-year-old is told to stay on the road and wait because he's barefoot. When the mother takes the 7-year-old into the forest and out of sight to show the younger boy the falls, when they return 30 minutes later, the older boy is gone and never found. Why? I would never leave my child, or anyone for that matter, in the middle of the forest while I did something as nonsensical as to show a child a waterfall and some rocks. Why? But again, we never hear any question as to the reasoning behind these unimportant decisions and split up a group. What I'm getting at is there a force of some kind, not even yet addressed in these investigations, that compels the hikers to make decisions that split the group? It's a valid question, and an important piece of a lot of these cases. It makes me wonder if common sense just exits the stage for these people and safety isn't a concern of any type. There are still things in the wilderness that kill people, regardless of anything we speculate on. Yet nobody beyond their own internal moral compass is ever questioned as to their lack of common sense. Maybe if they were, we'd gain some knowledge as to what was going on. If I was put on a defensive as to why I'd made a call on separating a group and fell back into a corner, I may just tell you that something told me this in my head. I don't know why, it just suggested this. I was compelled to do it. I'd never tell anyone to split up before these circumstances, but in this case I did, etc. That would at least spark a debate that something may at some time cause this. Thank you very much for your time, Dave. Food for thought. I'm going to throw this out to you guys. I want you to pay close attention. So, in the Skinwalker review I did a couple days ago, one of the things I told the audience was that what if the entity that's at this ranch that has radiated people, that has killed cattle and other animals, that has shown the ability to impart injury on people and basically control them, what if that entity was so smart that it was studying the people at the ranch? Now I pose this to you. What if the entity we're talking about was so smart that they wanted to see how humans reacted under different scenarios? When a loved one is missing, why does a human react so emotionally when a loved one disappears. Now, if you were an alien and you didn't have an ability to show empathy or know what love is, that would be a very difficult thing to understand if you saw humans. So what if this entity was trying to find the right DNA to make a perfect person in their mind that was strong, fast, unemotional, thought rationally, etc., etc. And what if they were studying us? And every once in a while they saw somebody that had special characteristics and they needed it for their DNA or whatever. Food for thought. I've talked about this in the past at conferences. I don't think I brought it up here, but there you go. But I got one more for you after this. Hey Dave, new letter. I'm writing you a short insight that might be relevant to the curious and surely somehow meaningful feature of missing shoes that is so evident among the missing 411 cases. In Western Australia, we have a problem with Jera dieback, a plant disease caused by a type of mold that seriously threatens the survival of the native Jara forest. The fungus that causes this disease is a big problem and is present in several countries, including the US. Many hiking trails in the infected regions of Western Australia have stations that will request you clean your boots to ensure that you don't bring any of the infection into the forest. I'm sure there would be many people with something similar to their own part of the world. Put simply, the shoes of the people you discuss, in your case especially hikers, are dirty. They would be covered with potentially harmful microbes, bacteria, and fungus. Dirty shoes would risk contaminating whatever environment the victims are being taken to, and therefore must be removed at the site the victim is intercepted. This would suggest that wherever the victims are being taken is a sterile and clinically controlled environment, perhaps a laboratory-like setting. Just like the Jera dieback and the issue of invasive species and disease control more generally, the more foreign these microbes are, the more potentially dangerous they are to you, and the more paranoid you would be of the contamination. I admire your fearless pursuit of truth. All the work you have done is not going unnoticed and unappreciated. Thank you. I've made this same point in past videos. I think it's important because my comment has always been, what's the one piece of material on your body that has the most germs, filth? Your shoe. Of course, your shoe. And then I talked about a sterile environment. More to think about. Next one. Hey Dave, my job requires me to do a fair amount of travel around my home state of Indiana. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a sec. Pay close attention to this letter. You're going to learn something from me and from Jason. Last week I was eating at a small diner near Shipshawana when a group of men came in and sat at a table near me. Over the course of the next few minutes, I learned these men specialize in tracking medium to large game, and especially white-tailed deer here in Indiana. The main job is to help hunters locate animals they had shot, but were unable to locate during deer season. But they had used their skills for a much different purpose during the off-season. As an avid white-tailed bow hunter, I was very much interested in their work. As the discussion continued, I learned they were also involved in tagging and geo-tracking game animals in various states across the country. This is done to help keep tabs on population numbers, overall health of the herd, migration patterns, etc. The interesting part is that they remarked how many of these tagged game animals were disappearing without a trace and the tracking equipment with them. When I heard this, I immediately thought of your work, what I follow very closely, and instantly wondered if there may be a correlation. When asked what they thought was causing this, they replied it was most likely poachers taking game illegally and destroying the trackers. I asked if the trackers were fairly visible when looking through a rifle scope, and they said they were very visible. This, of course, brought me to an obvious question. Why poach the one animal with the tracking device if you have an entire herd to choose from? And why do so on a repeated basis? This seems like the actions of someone trying to get caught, not trying to poach. Obviously, they did not have a good answer for this. Question: have you heard of similar instances? If this turns out to have some merit, it may lend credence to whatever is doing this and may be targeting areas and subsequently everything in those clusters, not just human beings. I'd appreciate your input if you feel that this may be relevant. Thank you, and God bless you and your family. I pray weekly for you and your family and pray that you continue to find comfort from God above. So thanks, Jason. Someone's paying attention here. Number one, if there is an entity taking people here on Earth, not leaving tracks, not leaving a scent trail, not leaving any evidence, why would that entity be just interested in humans? We have a lot of unique animals and mammals in the world, and it is almost nearly impossible for fish and game to get an adequate number on how many deer or elk may be in a state. It's impossible. So they really don't know year to year how many of these animals disappear unless they're tagged and unless that tag stops responding. Number one, if I killed a deer in the middle of the wild and that deer or elk had a collar, I guarantee two things. I'd take if I was a bad guy, I would never do this, but if I was a bad guy, kill the deer, clean it, strip it, and get the heck out. And I guarantee one thing, you wouldn't catch me with that collar. I'd leave it right where it was. And why is that? Because if you're caught with it, you're dead meat. Just like what you're carrying. So that's stupidity. So the idea that they're not finding these collars doesn't make sense to me at all. And I do believe that there's something going on that aligns with my missing persons work. Just like other people I've talked to you about have stated that mutilated cows are somehow related to our work. Well, we're working really hard on these topics. In the next several months, you're gonna hear something that may shake your soul. Now, aren't you happy you've been listening to these letters? More to come. Next letter. Hi Dave, I've been doing some research on if it's possible for science today to create a working cell. Well, it's impossible from our modern day smartest scientists in the world to even get close to creating an operational cell. It's insane that one little simple cell does all day, every day. It's like a small factor that is hard at work. I've seen where they dehydrated a cell, and when they tried to rehydrate it, it doesn't work. So it's safe to say there's no one alive that can create a cell. Back to the animal mutilations. The aliens are taking what they need to create what I think are the small grays, the ones that have been studied. Now, my interest is piqued. The genetic engineering that these entities are doing is quite amazing. I think they also need something humans possess, but I'm not sure. I think they also need some type of energy that only a living thing possesses. Maybe a soul? Like on the ranch when the craft was above the cow as it was dying. What if they were taking the cow's life force? Like the soul? I don't think a cow has a soul, but it does have a life force. I believe that is an important component to create these lower life forms like the smaller grays. This is not fact, but it does give me pause. I will continue to investigate those claims. They don't kill these cows just to kill. Even the angels won't kill for sport. God bless. Thank you. So here's a question for you. And Ben and I talked about this for hours. What has a soul and what doesn't have a soul? Well, Ben was the belief that every living thing had a soul, meaning an ant, a dog, a cat, a rat, everything that moves. And you know, over time, I've started to think that way. Haven't formulated my absolute thoughts, but thinking that could be true. Next letter. Just a brief note from steamy North Carolina to say another word of thanks. I'm headed to beautiful Colorado Springs on Tuesday, and for a guy who grew up in the once great Steel Valley of Youngstown, Ohio, it's an exciting adventure. As many of you know, I've told you that Ben spent 2 years at Youngstown playing for the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL. And that was where the 2 years he spent in the USHL before he went to Miami, Ohio on a scholarship. This is a note to say thank you. And yes, you hear so many of the villagers saying it, but I don't ever think it's mundane praise. You are saving lives. Before I read your books, watched your heartfelt videos, and looked deeper into the risks of being in the wild, I'd have just ventured into the woods thinking that my time hunting with Dad, boys, scouts, etc. would have me adequately prepared. Now I feel confident as I venture into the Rockies, but cautiously so. I've watched you lament with the loss of Ben with the compassion that only a dad of sons can know. I've seen the energy that Huck has brought to your home, and wait to hear her deep bark when you're babysitting. You just heard it in the background a few seconds ago. Moments of happiness make the chaos of life worth enduring, quoting the great Jordan Peterson. Let me stop there. If you guys don't know who Jordan Peterson is, you need to look him up. The man's brilliant. I've been following him for well over a year, and I learn something every time I listen to him. Great man. Thanks for being a warrior for families and that have no answers. In telling us their stories, you've given so many families answers of loved ones who do come home. Personal locator beacons. Everybody who goes into the wild alone should have a personal locator beacon. And get one at REI, get one at Amazon. Just make sure you get one. And you do not need one where you pay a monthly fee. Monthly fees are for communication PLBs. You don't need a communication PLB. All you need is a PLB. So, I hope that the revelations I just gave you in here resonated very clearly, because they were important ones. And I do think on many levels, things are evolving with us. And with your help, with the dialogue that we've created right here on this channel, we can move forward and hopefully make some strides in this. So, missing persons video. First one is about an area in California that I spent a lot of time in when I was a kid with my dad. When my grandfather, who was an outdoorsman to the max, he loved to hunt every weekend he could. And he liked to hunt the area around Mount Lassen. And besides hunting, he loved to fish. In the area around Hat Creek and such, he fished it all the time. And back during his days, the fishing was extraordinary. Now it's rough. But that area around Mount Lassen, been on it a bunch of times. And I will tell you that the trail to Mount Lassen itself is a good, healthy, challenging, but not really challenging, but challenging trail. Should be in shape to take it, but you don't need any special equipment, really. It's not like Mount Shasta, where you better be in super shape if you're going to go down that mountain. And if you haven't watched Vanished, you should watch it, because that was filmed on the side of Mount Shasta. It was a great day. But first case happened October 19th, 1920, about 4 p.m., a man named George Allen. George was married to his wife, Annie Poe, and they lived in Napa. And George was well known because he was the constable for Napa. Now, for people who don't know, even in the 1920s, Napa was known as the wine country of California. Beautiful place. Great wineries. If you've never seen it, best to be there in the spring when everything's blossoming. Don't go in the summer, it's way too hot. But just absolutely beautiful. It's just north of San Francisco, about an hour and a half. So George was a outdoorsman, besides being the constable. And he went to Mount Lassen with 3 other friends and his dog to hunt. Well, he had a heart issue that everyone knew about, but that didn't really slow him down. So with friends on October 19th, 1920, they walked out of their hunting camp and they started to walk out en masse together. And as they're walking along, they run into a mountaineer, somebody who was also hunting, but he was a known guide, lived up in that area. And right away, they struck up a great relationship with all of them. And this man told them that he would take them out for the day and show them around. And he did. Well, at about 2:30 in the afternoon, it started to rain and snow, and the guide told the group, "Hey, you need to go back to your camp. It's going to get rough." And Alan said, "No, I'm going to stay with you, hunt for another hour and a half or so." And everyone else went back to camp. Well, as would happen, about an hour and a half later, it kept snowing, getting deeper and more cold. And the guide told George Allen, "Hey, you better go back to camp. I'm going to go back to my camp. I'll see you guys in the morning." He said, "Okay." And he pointed him and he said, "That's the trail back to camp." Allen said, "Okay." Allen goes one way, guide goes the other. So again, it's still raining and snowing. Now, Allen had his dog tied to him while he hunted. Well, that night he didn't return. And Sunday morning, many of the guys in camp didn't sleep. And they get up and they drive into the U.S. Forest Service office and they notify Forest Service that they have a missing hunter. So they bring in dozens of Forest Service and game wardens and sheriff and other hunters. So for 3 days, there's a massive search, shoulder to shoulder, looking for George Allen. At the end of the 3rd day, George's dog comes into camp. Everyone's stunned. Stunned because the dog had a collar, was on a leash, and it was tied to George. The dog was there, didn't have a collar. So search and rescue says they have an idea. Let's put a collar on him and take the trail that George took that morning that he disappeared out and see if the dog will go with it. So they put the collar on, they start walking, and the dog won't move. Won't go up that trail. Won't want anything to do with it. Very odd behavior. So, on October 17th, on October 21st, the first search and rescue was started. And 3 days later, it was terminated. And then 3 feet of snow fell. Well, George's brother arrived and started a second search and rescue for his brother. And they were focusing on the headwaters of Lost Creek and Hat Creek. So let me show you on a map. This is Mount Lassen. And you can see this. You can see Mount Lassen all the way from Redding and Red Bluff, which is way out in this direction. You're looking east. This is north. So the headwaters of those creeks is located right here, and that's where they set up camp, and this was the area he was last seen. Lassen does have a fairly steep and abrupt start to its hill in some parts, but generally, all the way around, and all the green, it's pretty thick forest. It's healthy forest with a lot of deer. So the brother shows up, puts up a big reward, and they start searching. They're not finding anything. And they keep trying to get more and more people to search. So he disappears on October 19th. 9 days later, October 28th, the unimaginable happens. Smoke starts billowing out of Mount Lassen like it's going to erupt. Holy crap. Now, anybody who's ever driven up to Mount Lassen, you go through fields that have giant boulders that have been blown out of the top of that mountain. I mean, if you were within 10, 20 miles of that place, you would have easily been killed. So, search was terminated. George was never found. And it never made any sense to anybody. Here's why. So George had a heart condition. He wasn't going to outrun anybody. He wasn't going to do some big endurance. He knew he had a bad heart, so he just kind of moseyed along. There were hundreds of hunters in that area, and nobody came across him. Nobody ever came across him, which is really odd. Makes no sense. There have been other disappearances in that area of the Sierras, but this is one of the ones that really baffled me. George was considered an optimum outdoorsman, knew his way around, knows if you walk downhill, you're eventually going to find civilization in a creek to follow. None of it made any sense to anybody. So George Allen, unknown age, was never found. Next case. One of the most bizarre cases I've ever spoke about. Aubrey, 21, and Duwayne, 19, Dodds, D-O-D-D-S was their last name. Missing November 18th, 1938, from Joe Indian Pond in northern New York in the Adirondacks. Their family owned a farm in Richville where everybody worked. Well, on November 18th, the boys took the day off from the farm and went hunting. And they made about a 1-hour drive from Richville to the pond, where they had been before. So that was a Friday. They said that they'd be back that night, and they weren't. The next morning, Dad freaked out. He knew his boys were very reliable, good outdoorsmen, trustworthy, and they would never not come home. So he starts calling state police, U.S. game wardens, state game wardens. And while he's calling, 16 inches of snow fell in the area where they disappeared. But state and federal authorities gathered together 500 searchers to start to respond to Joe Indian Pond. So, you can look it up on Google, but this is the pond. It's not very large, it's kind of small. Search area was confined to this zone around it, and they were searching shoulder to shoulder. Get a pretty good look at it. Now, searchers knew that the boys were in really good shape, which was good. But the temperatures were getting pretty cold. The search and rescue coordinator said that in 7 days, they covered 11 square miles of forest, shoulder to shoulder. Didn't find anything. And the search and rescue coordinator said that he feared that the boys drowned in one of the swamps or ponds. And there was a big reward offered by the family. Let me say that to have one boy that age drown would not be unusual. To have 2 boys drown, that would be unusual. So there were 2 massive search and rescues. Mr. Dodds, the father of the boys, gave 2 or 3 of the most heroic presentations and talks to newspapers saying that he needed help with his boys. He loved him immensely. And he did get the feds to intervene, and he got the governor to intervene to push for the 2nd and 3rd searches. There was nothing found. Again, there were rumors that the boys ran away because they had a bunch of money. There were rumors that they were seen in other cities. All garbage. I've told you before, when these things happen, people tend to see the victims in places that are, you know right from the get-go it's not true. But people see things what they want to see. So, fast forward 2 years, November 2nd, 1940. Two hunters are in the same area where the boys are in, hunting almost the exact same spot. And they stumble across the bodies of two skeletons. And they bring out the Forest Service and they bring out the Fish and Game. And they take pictures of the clothing that's left. And it's identified by Mr. Dodds as the clothing of his boys. The coroner stated, and I couldn't believe this, that the boys died of hunger. Friends, that is the biggest bunch of garbage I've ever heard in anything I've ever read regarding a missing hunter. If search and rescue was true, and they searched 11 square miles shoulder to shoulder, then them firing off rounds, the boys should have seen and heard and called out. But they didn't. To die of hunger at age 21 and 19 when you're in really good shape, that could take anywhere from 8 to 12 days. Well, the search was going full bore for 7 or 8 days right after they disappeared. They never found them? They died of hunger? One more important item. I don't care what two people you get together. Their metabolisms are different. Their body fat is different. And people will die at different intervals based on that. The idea that these two boys laid down on the ground and died next to each other, both of hunger, is insanely stupid. Now, they found the boys, they stated, in the middle of a pond, in the middle of a swamp on a piece of land. And the search and rescue person later said that he wasn't sure that that land was searched. Why not? But aside from that, even if it wasn't searched, I've told you a million times, if you're a hunter and you're missing, you fire off 3 rounds. And then every other hour after that, you fire off 1 round so that people can know how to hone in on you. So in this instance, the boys laid down and died together. This is in a cluster zone of missing people we've identified. Water was a key factor. They are in a subgroup of hunters, and weather because it snowed after they disappeared during the search. Do I think that Aubrey and Duwayne had something unusual happen to them? For sure. I get very frustrated when a coroner will say something just to appease the community. But if they had 1 ounce of knowledge about relative facts, they'd know how stupid their statement was. Okay, next case. Involves a state I don't talk too much about, Tennessee. Charles Thurmer, 32 years old. You guys will like this story, so pay attention. Not because of the outcome, but because of where I'm going with this. This was Charles Thurmer. Now, Charles went missing November 21st, 1952, Norris Lake, Tennessee. He lived in Brookside Mills. He was a welder for Fulton Silphon. He had a wife and a baby, and his friends stated that he adored the family. We had a Friday off, and he went deer hunting. His wife made him lunch, and he took off, and he said he'd be home that Friday night. When he didn't get there, his wife called the sheriff. Now, he went missing November 21st. Report was made at about 9 p.m. that night. His car was found 2 days later on Sunday. And a day after that, search and rescue started looking for him. But before they did, they opened the car and they found an empty lunchbox inside. Why is that important? That's really important. That means that Charles went out and hunted, came back into the car, maybe got warm, ate his lunch that his wife made, put it back, and went back and hunted again. Which means that he's not going to be that far from the car, because that time of year gets dark about 4:30. He's not going very far from that car. And they should have known this. And I hope they would have known that. So, the search and rescue commander, on November 26th, or just a few days after they started the search, said that he didn't think that Charles was in the area. Said that they would scour that area around the car and they weren't finding anything. Well, that was puzzling to a lot of people, especially to his wife, who said, hey, my husband wouldn't go far from that car. So, November 26th is when the search and rescue commander said this. November 27th, a man named Willard Sharp heard of Charles. Now, so this is Norris Lake, this general area. This is the area where Charles Thurmer parked his car and went hunting. Lots of water. If you look at a Google Earth map, this whole area is really thick forest. So, November 27th, a man named Willard Sharp heard of Charles and had a dream that night. The night he heard of Charles, he had a dream. And he didn't pay much attention to it. But the next night, November 28th, he has another dream about Charles. And this time it's a location where Charles is at. November 29th, he has a third dream. Finally he tells himself, I got to do something. I think I know where this man's at. So, this is Willard. Just a normal guy. Nothing hugely special about him. So November 30th, he drives out to the search and rescue and he joins the search. He's never done this before in his life. Well, he kind of joined the search team that was near the Clinch and Powder River meeting point. And he started walking towards the lake. And search and rescue said, hey, you don't need to go down there. We've searched that 10 times. There's nothing there. Well, Willard, not the kind of guy to be dissuaded, decides, no, I'm going to go down by the lake. So he walks down towards the lake and he gets in amongst a bunch of large boulders. Yes, I did say boulders. And when he's 30 feet from the lake, he sees a red cap between boulders. He walks around the rock and he finds Charles Thurmer's body. He went back, got other searchers, and they were dumbfounded. One searcher said he had passed this location 50 times in a boat. Charles was 1 mile from his car. How did searchers miss that? Coroner said he died of exposure. More stupidity. Think about this. 1 mile from the car. 30 feet from the lake. He saw the lake from where he was standing, essentially. He had just gotten back from his car, had lunch. 1 mile walk, not tough terrain, 30 minutes maybe. Even at a slow pace. He gets cold. What do you do when you get cold? I'd go back to the car. I'm not a rocket scientist, but when you're cold, go back to the car, go home, get warm. The articles made no sense at all. Local reports for local consumption. They didn't expect a case from 1952 would be looked at 70 years later by some guy who had data from all over the world matching up cases that were similar in nature. You can never convince me that Charles Thurmer died from natural causes from exposure. I don't care what you say. Not a mile from his car, with no injuries and nothing wrong. That's number one. Number two, what was it about this incident that delivered the dream to Mr. Sharp? If our bodies have a soul, does our soul have the ability to reach out and connect with other people and tell them what happened? If it's not our soul, did some entity take Charles and want closure for the family and told Mr. Sharp? I have no idea. But folks, for the people that have been here over the months and months I've been doing this, how many times have I come to you and told you about a dream finding a body? Too many for it to be happenstance. A coincidence? Could you say it was a coincidence? I've never had a dream about finding somebody, and I'm in the business of researching people. What caused this? I could never find anything more about Willard Sharp having a dream. Some people would say, well, Sharp was in it because there's a large reward. Wrong. Mr. Sharp took the reward money that the state offered and gave it to the family of Charles. Good man. So let's think about this. Subgroup, hunters. Water, the lake was 30 feet away. Weather, it rained the day that Charles started to hunt. It was specifically noted in many articles that the hunters that day walked out in rain. He was found amongst boulders. The area had been previously searched. A dream found his body. And the cause of death? Exposure. How many times have I talked to you about this? In a worst case scenario, you could follow the perimeter of the lake, the lakeside, and eventually find a roadway, find a car, find other hunters. Whatever happened to Charles had to have happened between when he ate lunch and darkness, because when it's dark you have to quit hunting. So presumably occurred in the afternoon. Some of these cases even baffle Dave. And there's multiple parts to Charles Thurmer's disappearance that baffle me. I wish I could understand the dream aspect to this. Now, Mr. Sharp said he never wanted to have a dream. He never thought about Charles a lot, other than he said that he saw the story on the news that night, went to bed, and woke up that first time with a dream. And he said the dreams got more vivid with time. Fascinating. Fascinating. So friends, I'm back here to thank you again for watching these videos. Remember my Twitter, David Paulides, a Canine Missing. Listed below this under description of the video will be all the contact points. Do not purchase my books from eBay, Amazon, any online source. You'll get ripped off. They all want 2-3 times the value of what they cost on my site. And please make sure you're subscribed, because I've heard so many complaints from people saying I never get notified about your videos. Well, one place that every notification goes out every time we put up a video is on Twitter. And I usually post things on Twitter every day, sometimes a couple times a day. So that's a place to just follow me. You don't have to follow anybody else if you go on Twitter, other than just me. So you don't have to worry about all the garbage that takes place there. But anyhow, if you like this video, please share it on your social media. And God's willing, I will be back again with another edition of Missing 411 and the Canada Missing Project. Thanks for being here. Be nice to somebody today. When you go out into the society, do a friendly gesture for someone. Paulides out.